Are we live? Live video starting. Happy Thursday, everyone. Hey, okay, we're live. I'm Becky Aste, CEO of I Do Breakthrough, and this is my awesome husband and guest today, Sebastian Aste. Some of you know him, some of you don't, and have never seen him before, so this is his first time on the show. I feel like I'm hosting a podcast. So this interview today, I wanted to have my husband on because since starting this course, I Do Breakthrough, I've had so many people just ask, like, what does Sebastian think about all of this? Some out of curiosity. Others want to know what, on his side of the story, did he feel like was the turning point for you guys? And I've been posting and talking to so many of you, whether it's clients or just women in this group searching to improve their marriage, save their marriage. And I just thought, why don't we have Sebastian on here today so you could get to know my husband a little bit, and we're just going to have a chat and share with you, my intention, just so you know. My heart with this interview is really if you are at a place in your marriage where you're struggling to even have any hope that there could be a change or that it could be saved or restored, to give you a glimmer of hope. And if you have questions throughout the interview today, you can absolutely pop them in the chat. Let me make sure we can see the chat. Yeah, so if you're here live, just announce yourself and your comments will pop up. And we're just going to have some fun chatting and answering your questions. And I just hope that this helps you closer towards your breakthrough, wherever you're at on your journey in your marriage and your trauma healing. So, Sebastian, why don't we pass the mic to you? And I just wanted to give you a chance to share with some women who are on today who you are, a little bit about you. And I thought we would start with an easy question. And that would be, what is, activity in your life, or like a time that you just feel, a space where you feel confident and in your element and yourself, like your happy place? Tell us a little bit about you for those who don't know.
My happy place?
What is your happy place? Or just a place that makes you feel alive and yourself?
Probably on the soccer field. Yeah.
Which is where we met. We were friends that's where I started to be attracted to him. We were friends first, and then I saw him play soccer, and I was like, oh snap, he's really, really good at soccer. So, some women and men listening today, you love us as friends and family and are just here to support. Some are just curious, and you've heard my side of the story and haven't gotten a chance to hear his. And then some are barely hanging on by a thread. So wherever you're at today, Sebastian, the next question I wanted to ask you is going back to the beginning of our, relationship and the foundation of our friendship. When we met my freshman year of college and married right after I graduated, how do you perceive in retrospect, like the beginning of it all, of our relationship, like looking back with 2020 vision and retrospect? Was it bliss at the beginning and then it got hard, or were there cracks in the foundation now that you've had more time and wisdom to reflect on?
Yeah, I think there were always things that were evident as being challenges or potential challenges. I think in being how young we were and kind of being in an insular environment with the church, I think that, just speaking for myself, there were things that I just tried to kind of put on an air of I can do anything, like these little things, I just kind of like brush them aside and just have faith, try and do what, my advisors or, counselors were helping me do, and kind of like trying to basically present myself in our relationship in a specific light, the way that I thought it should be, based off of other examples, and they were good examples, but I think in that, I think that there was kind of like, instead of really tackling issues head on, I think we kind of tried to either pretend that they weren't as serious as they were, and just try and move forward and not really deal with things. And I don't know, I think that maybe we were a little, I don't know, naive when it came to the seriousness of some of these things. And a lot of them were like internal, individual things, that would manifest themselves in our dynamic as a couple. But again, I think we were so focused on just kind of like presenting ourselves as these good people, these good Christians, that we never really like allowed ourselves to really dig deep and get into all the ugly, dirty, all dark stuff that's not really fun to deal with, but that's super important. So yeah, I feel like it wasn't until maybe the last 3 or 4 years that we really started to seriously take a deep dive into identifying what a lot of these things were.
Yeah.
Things that we maybe even, or at least I didn't even want to acknowledge, or believe.
Yeah. I agree. I think a lot of people can say this. It's just, you start out and you think it's bliss, and there was so many beautiful parts, but in retrospect, I can see a lot of cracks and just baggage we both brought in that we were blind to at the time. And it took me a while to even admit that, I think, because I thought admitting the cracks would negate the beauty that was there too, but it's been cool to wrestle with that and come to a place of there was a lot of good that, brought us together, but there was a lot of toxic, undealt with stuff too that was under the surface that we had never gotten to the root of.
Sure, yeah.
So the cats are playing with this little cup right now. Okay, we're gonna take the cup. Go play. So at what point would you say, from your perspective, things went awry or got hard? Is there a specific time that you can pinpoint, or just what comes to mind when you think, okay, it went from the initial honeymoon phase and the beginning stage, okay, there's some red flags here, or some warning bells, or this is kind of out of our control?
I think they were always kind of there, but I think they became the most evident when we, after Ollie was born, and we moved back and got out of the full-time ministry. I think that was our first time being outside of an environment that was really focused on other people, and an outward focus, and then being removed from that, and then finally for the first time in our marriage after 6 years?
5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
That was the first time we, I think, had time to really, do a lot more introspection and personal, development, as opposed to focusing on other people. And so I think that once we started doing that was when a lot of things just became just a lot more obvious that this was something that we actually needed to deal with. It wasn't just gonna just go away.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. And for people watching, I didn't tell Sebastian any of these questions ahead of time, so I'm also curious how he's asking, how he's going to answer these. But that's what I would have said too, is when Ollie was born, so much of what was under the surface just bubbled to the top. And that's common with a lot of people. It's the, new life changes or stressors. Even though Ollie is a wonderful life change, it brought out a lot of the undealt with dynamics between us. So I know in those moments, a lot of people, we did it too. I see a lot of people default to this same feeling of blaming each other, blaming the other person in the moment for all of the pain and confusion and the toxic dance happening. And I don't know if you've heard, I know you listen to Tara Brach. Tara Brach is one of my favorite meditation teachers. She's on podcasts, but she talks about the story of the second arrow. You heard of that? Where the first arrow that we get hit with is this human suffering that we all experience, you know? So if we're saying in a marriage context, like every marriage has problems and has pain and has issues. But then the second arrow is when we come around and shoot ourselves with blame or shame or, you know, just criticizing ourselves for having that first pain. And so when things did start getting hard and bubbling to the surface, you know, I know we blamed ourselves, we blamed each other. There's like a lot of already pain there, and then shooting ourselves and shooting each other with this second arrow. And so one of the things I wanted to ask is just from your perspective, like as a husband during those times when things were really hard and really dark or seemed hopeless for us, like what were you feeling or fearing or any just like thoughts going through your head at that time?
What did I fear?
Yeah, any fears or thoughts or just feelings. Like I talk to women all day, you know, and I'm constantly hearing what's inside their head, and a lot of times they're wondering, like, when I'm not clicking with my spouse, when it's not working, I'm curious like what he's thinking or what he's feeling, and I wish we had the communication to be able to just lay it out to each other. So I don't know if you can just offer, if you remember during some of our darkest times, like what went through your head. I know that's a really big question.
Yeah, I don't know. That's hard to answer. But I think it was, I mean, I'm by nature a very introverted, introspective person, and I isolate a lot. That's kind of how I deal with conflict in my mind or deal with pain, is by trying to resolve it internally and not trusting other people to understand where I'm coming from or my thought process. And so I think a lot of times I felt very alone, and I felt like we were just kind of operating on different frequencies, and I think just a general fear of not being able to live up to the standard that I felt was being placed on me, and how I needed to like behave and act, you know, as a husband or as a Christian or whatever. You know, I felt like there were a lot of external forces that I felt pressured by to respond to in the appropriate way. So what I found myself doing was kind of like tailoring my exterior, not necessarily in an inauthentic way, but just kind of tailoring it so that you or other people would just kind of like see what I thought they wanted to see, you know, but internally I was still wrestling with all this conflict, you know, and felt like I didn't have someone that I could just be honest with about my true feelings about things. So, yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about the pressure and the external forces, and I know I played a part in that too. And that actually leads to the next question. So one of my clients, she's awesome. She's in her 3rd week of the beta program right now. And she's been experiencing major shifts in her personal healing and her marriage. But she wanted to ask the question, when Becky started her journey to heal her trauma, how did you feel about her bringing up triggers? What made it easier for you to hear, and what made it harder?
Well, the triggers are helpful to know because they're just instances in your life that send you into this, you know, kind of like almost like fight or flight. I don't know, it's just like an automatic response to something when you're triggered, right? And knowing what those triggers are, I think, enables you to respond in a way that is actually healthy as opposed to just kind of defaulting to your character weaknesses. So knowing what your triggers were or is helpful, because I know that, like, okay, Becky's triggered right now, like,
Yeah.
I need to either give her space or just listen or just ask, is there anything that I can do to help? And if there's nothing I can do to help, then it's just done, you know, and, like,
Yeah.
not to be like insensitive, but it's like, if there's nothing I can do, you're just triggered, then it's not necessarily like my responsibility to fix you, you know. It's you gotta work it out, you know, through the tools that you have. And so I think even just kind of getting to that point took pressure off of me to, like, okay, when you're expressing something to me or something that triggered you or a fear or something like that, it's like, okay, now I don't feel like I have to have the right response in that moment. I can just acknowledge what you're feeling and then, you know, give you the space to do what you need to do without taking that burden on to myself, which would a lot of times that would be a trigger for me. Like when you were triggered, that would trigger me into this default mode. It's like, oh great, here we go again. Now I gotta like go through my, you know, my process of like, I don't know, just kind of changing my, I don't know, whatever I think Becky needs is like, okay, now I gotta like conform to that. And I think through this process, it's allowed both of us, I think, to really identify what the triggers are for us as individuals, and I don't feel as much, or it's almost even just giving myself more grace. Like it's like, okay, I don't have to. This is a Becky issue, you know, unless I caused it, you know, unless I was the source of that pain, then, you know, I need to take ownership for that. But if it's something else, you know, then I don't have to bear that as like, I don't know, like pressure or guilt or shame or any of that stuff. I don't know if that answered the question, but
it does, which was huge for you, because for so long, you know, out of a good heart of like, I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm trying to, like you said, live up to that standard, you know, trying to appease me, and there's a lot of codependency and enmeshment between us, you know, in the majority of our marriage before this dance started to really shift. So I know that was huge for you, just being able to have the dignity for yourself of like, I can set boundaries too, you know, like if Becky's triggered, I can empathize to a point, but I don't need to take care of her and fix this problem. You know, I can be there as a witness and hold space. And so I think along with that, you know, I know this particular client, I think she's curious, just as she starts practicing these tools in her marriage, was there anything in particular that made it easier for you to hear from me, or anything that was not helpful when I was sharing triggers?
Yeah, I think when you would just share like, hey, I'm feeling triggered by whatever, but knowing that I wasn't being expected to have to heal you or fix you or be the source with that codependency. There were a lot of times where I felt like I had to it was my responsibility to maintain your happiness, you know, to a certain degree, and that's pretty exhausting, you know. So I think once you really showed that you were taking ownership and over your own character weaknesses and your own struggles and your own healing, that alleviated this this pressure and this burden, you know, of being the source of joy, you know. I don't know. I mean, that's probably an exaggeration.
It's not actually. It's pretty accurate. Very accurate.
Yeah. So, because before, when you would communicate things to me, I felt like I had to now it was my responsibility to respond in a way that was going to fix it or make it better to some degree. But now I feel like, okay, she's just sharing what she's feeling. She's just being open and she's honest and communicating. But I don't have to, I mean, I guess it's just saying the same thing 5 different ways. But so I think that transition of just like going from the sharing from a place of fear to sharing from a place of like self-awareness, you know, and I think that was a big difference and totally changed how I received whatever you were what you were communicating.
Yeah. Which we go into depth, you know, and really teach the women that I work with. There's a whole new way to communicate that I learned that's more effective than anything that I had ever been handed before. And once I started practicing that, I noticed the shift. I noticed with you, and that's what I talk about with my clients. But that leads into, you know, the next question is on your end. I know when I felt the biggest shift, you know, when I started practicing these tools, but I'm curious from your perspective, when did you start to notice a healthy shift in our dynamic? What contributed to that?
Yeah, I think again, it's pretty similar. It was just when you really started implementing a really diligent practice of, I guess, the breathing, you know, meditation, you know, working the steps. You know, it felt like you had a plan for what you were going to do whenever you felt triggered, and that you could work through it using the resources you had, as opposed to in the past where it was just like, it was me or some like random couple, you know, that we thought maybe had a better answer for us, you know, and that always kind of sucked too, because now I felt like they don't really understand the nuances, you know, of like the little things in the marriage that you never really know until you live with somebody, you know, and so it's like receiving counsel is helpful, but it can also be damaging if they don't really understand like the dynamic well, you know, and it could be well intentioned, but oftentimes I felt like I was just being told to it just felt like it was always like my responsibility to make everything better, and and there were things that I did need to be better at and take more ownership in, especially in my character deficiencies, but it really, I think the big shift happened when I was like, okay, like Becky's gonna go work on herself, like on her own time and through her own outlets, and I don't have to be the primary source anymore. And so that was a big, like, I just felt it's almost like a sense of relief, like and that relief led to me just feeling like, I don't know, just more peace, you know, more safety, you know, and how we could communicate, and it let me be more honest about how I was feeling about different things, because I didn't feel as much pressure to have to just, like, always be meeting this standard, you know, that was being set, like I said, by external forces or external people. I don't know if that
and
makes sense.
I just think we live like in an external resource culture, like it's an advice-giving culture that we live in, and everybody's always giving people advice, and a lot of times it's unsolicited, but I just felt like you pointed to one of the main things that I had to identify and work through, which was trusting all these external resources, because I truly did not trust myself at the end of the day, and I had no idea how that was linked to the trauma that I went through, and that was like probably the most vital, important part of my healing journey was learning to trust myself on an energetic level and heal my nervous system so that I could feel safe in my own body. And you're right, like nobody else knows you or your marriage the way that you do. So it was kind of fascinating to me how little, even when I went through that course, how little advice I got and how many questions she asked and how much she pointed me back to myself more than I had ever been pointed back to myself before, and taught me how to trust me and my connection with my intuition, how to heal that and all that stuff. So I think that's vital, and that's what I want to pass on, you know, to the women that I work with. And I tell them I'm doing my job if, you know, you feel like at the end of the day it wasn't anything I said, but it was what you discovered in you. And my job is just to continually point these women back to themselves. So
I think that, yeah, now you saying that, that was huge also in our dynamic, just sensing that you were coming from a place of strength and more confidence in yourself and not needing me or needing somebody else to tell you that what you were doing was the right thing, but that it was generated from a place of like security, you know, and yeah, self-esteem and stuff like that, and that's huge too, you know. I think just I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but you just kind of like sense a shift. It's like, oh, she's not really coming from like this insecure, codependent place. She's coming from a place of like really just sincerely, you know, working on herself and utilizing all the tools at your disposal. Like that in and of itself was really helpful for me too. Yeah. Just knowing that you were entering into like a new phase in your life where you were really just kind of like, I don't know, it just seemed like you're just kind of coming into your own power, you know, and it's attractive, it's, you know, it's helpful in so many different ways. Like, I don't know, it just makes that, I think that was a big,
that was huge.
Big pro,
It was a huge awakening in our communication. If you guys want to hear more about that, I have a whole training on how to reverse toxic communication in your marriage without saying a word, and it's really, that's what it's about. He's talking about it's an energy, it's felt, you can learn all the tools and all the right things to say and all of that, but if it's not coming from that internal source, right, of power and security and confidence with this healed, you know, internal you, then he's gonna sniff it, and you sniffed it for so long. So that wasn't on my agenda, but I'm glad you brought that up. That was key for sure. So coming in for a landing, you know, I've shared with the women that I coach and those in my space a lot of just pinch me moments, like moments where in this past year where I just am like, pinch me. Like, I'm so grateful for Sebastian and where my marriage is at, and I can't believe we just worked through that trigger that fast, or I can't believe how playful we are. I can't believe how safe I feel emotionally. I can't believe, you know, a lot of these moments that I've gotten to share, and I'm so grateful for it. And we're by no means perfect. This is a hard week, even for both of us. And I think what's different for me now is the hard weeks and the triggers don't derail me like they used to. It used to ruin everything, and I couldn't be present in any other area of my life if we were off. So when you said maybe this is an exaggeration, my source of joy came from you, no, that's like extremely accurate. And that's what's beautiful now is like we still fight, we still miscommunicate, we still trigger each other, but it doesn't derail me the way that it used to. And so one of the last questions that I have was, you know, for you, are there any moments or dynamics in our marriage that come to mind that you feel the most grateful for? Just moments of like, wow, this is definitely a testament to the power of healing.
Yeah, I think just, I mean, this might sound too general, but once it really felt like you were working, like we went from like a codependent to interdependent relationship where we kind of both had our own unique, you know, sets of interests, and we could take time to kind of pursue things individually and not feel this pressure or need to like be doing everything at all times together. And but just kind of like having like independent lives to a degree, and hobbies and passions and stuff, but then being able to come together and still share that as friends, like but not as like, I don't know, it like stopped feeling so needy, I guess, and it just felt like, we were just kind of coming at our relationship now from places where we're both working on ourselves as individuals. We're both giving each other space to work out, things that we need to be working out, trusting each other that we're working our individual programs, and then coming together, as husband and wife, and as parents, and as just kind of partners in life, but it just felt like a much more healthy dynamic. I don't know if that answered your question.
It was a great answer, special.
Right.
So coming in for a landing for men, because there's men who are listening on here as well and wanted the recording. If there's a man out there just feeling stuck in their marriage, or maybe in addiction or depression, or just like you were explaining earlier, different frequencies with their wife, what word of encouragement or glimmer of hope or message can you share with the guys?
Well, I think everything that you've done and the work that you've put in to heal yourself and your trauma from our marriage, or trauma from childhood or growing up, like just you putting in intentional work has made a huge impact. But I think the guys have to do the same. You have to be willing to. I think the biggest thing for me was I have a very addictive nature, and I'm an escape artist, and I want to do things even if they're not self-destructive things. I still want to do things that just kind of like provide me with some type of like either adrenaline rush or escape, or living in like fantasy land or something. But I think what's really important is learning to sit with the pain and stop numbing, and whatever it is, if it's in your marriage or just in your personal life or whatever, like if you're stuck in this cycle where you self-sabotage, which I was doing, and and then you use something to try and make yourself feel better, or numb out, and then you just get stuck in this never-ending cycle. I think it's really important to be honest with yourself, and find someone that you can trust who can hear what's really going on, but be willing to sit with the pain for as long as it takes, so that you can start really implementing things that actually address that and address your own personal trauma and your own wounds and your own, I think even grieving sometimes, like there were things that I felt like I had to mourn, over the what I thought was going to be my life, versus what it is now, and so, allowing yourself the space to do that and to hurt, and to be sad, and all those things, like that's okay, because once you go through that process, now you become much more in touch with yourself, and you've identified, those areas, and now you can actually start working on them with intention, as opposed to just kind of like knowing that there's something that's off, but you're not really dealing with it, or you're just trying to just get by, and I felt like that's kind of what my life was starting to become, was just like this autopilot, just like, all right, just got to do what I got to do and fulfill my obligations, and every now and then, I'll get to do something that I want to do that's fun, but like, I don't know, that's just such like I don't think anybody wants to just exist like that, so I don't know. Allow yourself, the space and the time that you need to actually heal, get well, get counseling, do groups, do, I don't know, get a sponsor, whatever you need, but there's so many different tools, but in the recovery world, there's a lot of tools, but you gotta be willing to be uncomfortable, or else you just stay in the same cycle.
Yeah, and something I didn't expect with that, because that kind of brings it full circle to the beginning, how we said we started out with this baggage that we didn't really want to address or weren't aware of, and because it's not fun to talk about that. But a surprise out of all of this work that we've done, I think, is seeing, oh my God, how rich our conversations can be now, and our connection, because of how much we've dug so deep to the messy parts. And at the time I felt like this is not going how it's supposed to, this is all wrong, this feels terrible, everything's just dark and not working. And now I'm like, oh my God, what was the biggest pain has turned into like our wisest teacher and a really beautiful source of connection, which I didn't see. And not in a trauma bonding way, like we're two like broken, messed up people who are, magnetizing towards each other because we don't know how to be whole. We are, we have broken spots and, we do mess up stuff, but it's now from this place of like we're whole and healing, and there's a lot of richness that goes along with that. So I think that's a wise word to the men. And then the last is to the women, the wives who, whether it's, okay, I want to put in the work, I want to save our marriage, but I don't know if my husband is willing to be on board, or I don't know how to communicate to him. Like, what encouragement do you have for the wives watching this interview today?
Well, you say the Serenity Prayer, you can only control what you can control, the things outside of your control. If you try and control them, it will just go insane. So ultimately, whether or not your husband is on board, I guess it doesn't really matter. Like, I guess it matters, but it's also like, that's out of your control. But what you can do is put in the work on yourself, and I think that if you work on yourself, your husband will sense it, he'll feel it. There will be a shift, even if it's, not like a really obvious, just like you were saying, the energy in the room can shift, the vibrations that you send out, and that you kind of like, that you feel from other people, like, or that you give off to other people, I think that shifts. And I think even so, the more whole and healed that you are, I think will give your husband, I don't know, just like maybe just, I don't know, just the feeling of health, and space and hope, and I think that can be infectious. And I mean, that's not a guarantee, like, ultimately everybody has to account for their own, their own lives and their own behavior, but ultimately, like, you can't control other people, so just focus on what you can do to better yourself, and hope and pray that is met with gratitude, and that they'll want to put in the time too. I mean, that's kind of what it was with us. You had started your recovery work. It was like 2 years almost before I started getting involved with that kind of stuff. So it took time. But I think that we're in a much better place. Like you said, it's not perfect, and we're still working through stuff, but it's definitely a much better dynamic overall, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I could say so much more, but we gotta wrap it up. It is 3:39, and I just want to thank you, Sebastian, for being our guest today. And we've been married 10 years now, and we're completely different people than when we met each other. But I love you so much, and I appreciate you and the person that you are and that you're becoming. I really am excited, honestly, to just continue to dive deeper into getting to know, and I'm really grateful you came on today, even though you hate being the center of attention. This is not your vibe. I appreciate you being interviewed by me. So we're going to end with a fun game. You ready? I'm going to do 10 rapid-fire questions. So don't think too hard. Just say what the first thing is that comes to mind. And...
Won't do that.
Ready? Go. Okay, 1. How long are you planning to grow out your hair?
I don't know. I think shoulder length, maybe.
Oh, Lord. Okay, number 2. Do you believe in conspiracy theories?
It's always a theory until it's proved true.
Number 3. What's the best dream you've ever had?
Being a 4-year-old kid in heaven, going down a slide, and at the top of the slide was Jesus, and you give him a hug, and it was the best hug ever, and you go down the slide, and you go back up, and then give him another hug, and go back down the slide, and go back up, and it was just a bunch of 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds just doing that over and over again, and it was the best feeling in the world.
That is amazing!
Yeah.
I love that. I want that dream. Number 4, would you rather have to dance every time you walk or sing every time you speak?
Dance.
Yeah, because you got the moves, babe.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather be able to speak in any language or be able to talk to animals?
Any language.
Would you rather never play soccer again or never play music?
Ooh.
You love soccer and music. That's why that's really hard.
Probably soccer. I'm getting old.
Yeah, your knees getting creaky.
Had a good run.
All right, the last 4 rapid-fire questions. Me or you is the answer. Number 1, who is the best looking?
You, for sure.
Who is the most stubborn?
Me.
Who's most likely to suggest getting takeout?
Me.
Yeah. And then who's the cleanest?
You.
Yes. Thank you for being on the show today, Sebastian. Let me make sure we didn't miss any questions. Maggie! Hi! Okay, thanks for listening today. If you want help, if you want, a call, I do free strategy calls because this is not something that we talked about today that's easy to figure out on your own. And if you feel, like you need direction today, or you're even curious about getting coaching from me and working with me, what that would look like, to even explore the ID Breakthrough program, just click the link in the caption and book a call with me, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction with your next steps. Love you guys. Have a great Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.